Good morning, Garden's Gardeners. My name is Karen and I'm coming to you from our main house today, our main store here in Inver Grove Heights. And it's a very beautiful but kind of chilly March morning. And so today we're going to be talking about our BareRoot selection. This is the time of year when a lot of folks are starting to think about their spring garden. And BareRoot is a great and very economical way to get started with your garden. Before really you can get out into the nursery. So if you were to visit us today and you were to take a peek at our nursery lot, which is our north lot out there, you're going to see a lot of snow and a lot of pavers. So there's no plants to buy yet, but here in our main store we have a wonderful selection of early bulbs as well as BareRoot. And I have a lot of folks come to me and ask, Karen, these plants look great, the prices are amazing, how do I grow BareRoot? So we're going to be talking today and taking questions from our viewers about BareRoot plants, how we grow them, what kind of selections we can get a hold of in BareRoot, and how to take care of them in our garden, what are some advantages and some disadvantages. If you have questions, please feel free to hit us up on our Facebook feed, and I will be checking the feed throughout the day. So if you catch us later or after the event has finished, I will be checking in on our feed and answering your questions there as well. So please feel free to ask questions if you have anything that pops up as you view us today. All right, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, Karen, one of our first questions is what's the advantage of planting BareRoot?
All right, so what is the advantage of planting BareRoot? First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about what BareRoot is. So here I have an Echinacea magnus. This is an Echinacea that we will have for sale out on our nursery lot in the spring. It's going to be, so there's some advantages and disadvantages. The first thing that is an advantage, you can look at that, that's the price right there, $2.99 for any Echinacea is a steal of a deal. Let me tell you, what a great deal. So if you are budget minded, if you want to grow a beautiful garden, but maybe you don't have a huge budget for your garden, BareRoot is an excellent way to get really high quality plant stock at a lower price. Now, if you want to know what a BareRoot is, so here's my $2.99 Echinacea magnus. It looks a lot different from what you're going to see out on our nursery lot in the spring. So in the spring, our Echinaceas will be sold in 1-gallon pots, and they're going to be a lot older than this plant. So this is a younger plant. It's not a baby, it's not a seedling, but it's maybe 1 year old. And you can see it has a beautiful, healthy root. Just look at that gorgeous root. Oh, beautiful. And then here's the base of the plant, and here you can see the new spring growth that's going to be waking up here and ready to grow in your garden. So this is what you're going to expect to see when you open a BareRoot plant. You're going to expect to see the root stock. You're going to expect to see the center of the plant that the plant is growing from, and perhaps some waking up growth as well. But what you're going to have is you're going to have a much younger plant than you can buy out on the nursery lot, which are going to be much more older, much more established. They're going to be much smaller, and they're going to be a little bit more delicate than something that's already potted up and growing.
Will those plants catch up?
So a BareRoot plant, when you get it in the ground, within a year or two will catch up to our nursery stock. And in fact, they're going to be a lot faster growing than anything you can get from seed. So definitely BareRoot is an older plant. It's not as old as our potted selections, but it will catch up. And of course it depends on the plant, right? So some of our fruits are only maybe a year or two old, and eventually they will catch up to our potted stock. But those plants are 2 to 3 years along. So you may even get a harvest out of one of our potted blueberries, perhaps this year, for sure next year. But with a BareRoot blueberry, you're probably waiting 3 years to harvest at least. So will they catch up? Yes, but you're going to be waiting a little bit longer to get those phenomenal results that you'll see out of our potted stock that you're purchasing this spring and summer. And so of course the price reflects that.
Another question is, when can we plant them? Does the soil need to be a certain temperature?
Right, so when do we plant BareRoot? If you go out into your garden today here in Minnesota, you're gonna see what I'm seeing in mine, which is pools of ice, right? Some snow, some ice, very hard ground. There's no way I'm digging anything in the middle of March in Minnesota. It's just not going to happen. So what do I do with all of this stuff when I'm buying it? Well, with a plant like this little Echinacea where it is actually starting to grow and it is a little bit awake, I'm actually probably going to pre-pot it and let it grow on a little bit in the spring before I pot it into the ground in late April when the soil is workable. For most BareRoot stock though, you're probably going to see something like this raspberry. So here I have a heritage raspberry. This is a very, very classic raspberry. If you've ever bought a house that had pink raspberries growing in the back, it's probably heritage. They're a great raspberry. They're super tough. They taste delicious. They are a summer and autumn harvest, so it's an ever-bearing, quote unquote, which isn't really bearing raspberries all summer, but it does have 2 picking seasons. So this is a great raspberry, and the price on this guy is really good too. So this is a very affordable heritage, but it's a young plant. And you can see that there is no leaves on this guy whatsoever. It is totally dormant. It's completely asleep. And so with most BareRoot, this is what you expect to see. So you probably aren't going to see little leaves. You're probably just going to see an asleep plant, and that's totally normal. For folks who are new to gardening, that might look dead. You're like, well, Karen, that's dead. No, it's not dead. It's asleep. And like most plants, if you go out into your garden in the wintertime, you're just going to see branches, right? There's no leaves out there. If there are any leaves, they're dead leaves. So this looks exactly like the raspberry canes in my garden right now, just a lot tinier. And so what I'm going to do with a plant like this is I'm going to do something called healing in. And healing in means that as soon as I have some portion of soil that is workable, and in my garden, that's my raised beds. And so coming next week, we're going to have 50-degree days. I'm going to be able to get into some of the soil in my raised bed, and I'm going to heal in my BareRoot that is still dormant, right? I can't take this little Echinacea magnus and put him in the garden because he's going to die. He's already awake. He's already got little leaves growing, and he needs to be in a pot. But for this little raspberry here, I can go ahead and I can do what's called healing in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my garden fork. I'm going to go into my raised bed carefully because I don't want to compact the soil. Once it's workable, once I can actually make a hole, I'm going to move some of that soil around on a 50-degree day. I'm going to take this plant, I'm going to put him in at an angle. So he's going to go in probably like this, right? He's not going to go in like this like I would plant him in the garden. He's going to go in at an angle because I don't have much soil depth to work with. It's still March. Most of that bottom soil is going to be frozen. I'm only going to be able to work with my topmost layer of soil. I'm going to put him in at an angle. I'm going to cover him with soil, maybe put a little mulch over him to protect him. And then in late April or early May, when my garden is awake and things are growing, I will take him out of the raised bed where I've healed him in, and I will plant him in his final location. So I'm essentially using those areas of soil as a holding tank, if you will, as a waiting line, an assembly line for my young plants to wait until the garden is ready to receive them. So for something like this Magnus or this blueberry, we have a different strategy where we're actually going to have to pot these guys up because, as you can see, they have done what we call breaking dormancy. So this little plant is fully awake. This is a Northland blueberry. Northland blueberries are a smaller blueberry. They're what we call a half high bush blueberry, where they were crossed with a big 6-7 foot tall blueberry and the little tiny carpet blueberries you might see if you ever visit the North Shore. This was developed by the University of Minnesota. It's Zone 3 Hearty. It's a great blueberry for Minnesota. All blueberries, whether it's Northland or Early Blue or Patriot or any of the ones you'll see on our nursery lot later in the spring, need very, very acid conditions. So when I go to plant this blueberry, we're going to grab some of our Gertens potting soil down here. And you can see our Gertens potting soil is a great potting soil for any repotting or starting process with larger plants, not with seedlings, but any BareRoot that you're working with, any houseplants that you're working with. I'm going to fill a 2-gallon pot with that Gertens potting soil, and I'm going to take a 1.5 cups of soil acidifier. Now, Espoma soil acidifier is my personal choice for soil acidification. It is it's an organic product. It's a fairly safe to work with product. We also sell soil acidifications like soil sulfurs, iron sulfate, so there's a lot of options. I love Espoma products. They're very easy and safe to work with. So I'm going to take a 1.5 cups of soil acidifier. I'm going to mix that in with my potting soil, and I'm going to add my blueberry. I'm going to put the blueberry in the pot so that if I take it out of its little bag here you can see the root. Very healthy, lovely looking root system. And I'm going to put him right there. So his final position in the pot is going to look like this. He's going to be right at the soil surface so that the soil part is under the soil, and this little tiny stalk here, the baby stalk, this is going to be slightly above the soil. So he's going to sit in the pot and he's going to look like this. okay, when I'm finished with all of my potting up process. I'm going to put him in a sunny window. He doesn't need to be super warm, but just room temperature is fine. If you have a 3-season porch that's staying above freezing in right now, you can put them out on the 3-season porch. That's a great place for BareRoot plants that have started to break dormancy because it's warmer than outside, but it's cooler than inside, and it has lots of sun. So a 3-season porch is a great place. I could put this out on my kitchen patio under a closure in a cold frame if I had a cold frame available. Anything, ideally, if you can keep the temperatures of this plant at or above 45 degrees so that you're not losing your baby leaves, but the plant is continuing to grow.
And we have a question from Erin. Can any of the fruiting shrubs be planted and overwintered in pots? She struggles with deer and rabbits.
Good morning, Erin. So potting up blueberries and other fruiting plants, absolutely, yes, you can. Blueberries, little blueberries like Northland, strawberries, smaller raspberries, all work great in pots. And the main thing you have to watch with a pot, if you have any kind of animal, make sure the animals aren't getting to the pots, because a raspberry plant in a pot is just as appealing to a deer as a raspberry plant in the ground. So you have to place your pot smartly, because just being in a pot is not enough to ward off that animal feeding behavior. It'll help for rabbits. It's not going to stop a deer. So you want to make sure you're putting it in a place where deer are not regularly browsing. And then in the winter, it absolutely must go in the garage. Why is that? Because with all of our pots are up above the ground. They do not have the insulation around the root base that our plants that are living in the ground naturally have. And so we have to provide them with that insulation, or the plant will die. Now, it is possible to overwinter zone 3 plants in a zone 4 area in a raised pot. And why is that? It's because the root of a zone 3 plant is a lot more cold hardy than the root of a zone 4. So the rule of thumb, if you're potting outside in a big planter and you don't want to move that big planter inside or into the garage or over into a sheltered area on the east side of your home, is that you have to work with zone 3 hardy plants in order to have that planter survive year to year in zone 4. And obviously, if you're living up in Duluth or up in the upper part of Minnesota or Wisconsin, then you have to try to find zone 2. So you're always using a plant that is one zone hardier than your winter hardiness zone.
Another question we have is, you were talking about planting the blueberry that had already broken dormancy. How do I need to water that? Yes,
so as with any plant, once you put it in a pot and it's no longer dormant, you have to care for it as you would a house plant. So with a blueberry, or like this little echinacea here, every time my pot dries, which if it's in a cooler spot, if it's in a 40 to 50 degree temperature area, is going to be a lot longer than in my house where it's 70 degrees. The plant is growing faster and it's using up more water. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my finger in the soil, and up to at least my main knuckle here, right? So not my little knuckle, but this knuckle. I'm going to stick it in the soil. I'm going to pull it out. If it feels wet, I don't have to water. If it feels dry, I need to go ahead and water. And for those of you who are like, I'm not sure how well to water, do I just like spritz it? My favorite way, and it's very easy, is just to take a big, clean 5-gallon bucket. You can't use a bucket that you've used for like soapy things or other applications, but if it's a chemical-free bucket, or you just buy one at Target, you fill that with water, you just plop your pot in there, leave it for 20 minutes, and then pick it up, and it will be saturated with water, and that will provide a much, much greater watering for those young plants, instead of having to like pour water on these tiny baby leaves, which is not great. I mean, they will take some, water pounding, but you can break these little baby leaves off. So if you bottom water, that will go a long ways to really saturating that root, and then you have to water less frequently, because instead of just a little bit of water on top, you're really allowing that water to soak through the whole pot, and it's going to stay wetter a lot longer.
So someone is just coming into the program here. Do I need to keep the roots moist until I plant them?
So that's an excellent question. If you are working with a plant that is in full dormancy, like this raspberry, this heritage raspberry here, has not woken up, the soil inside of the bag is still moist. If you don't open it, it should stay moist for quite a while. Now, I might check on this every 2 to 3 weeks while it is dormant if I haven't stuck it outside. So there are a couple holding ways that we can do. We can heel it in. Outside, we ignore it, okay? It is getting the exact same weather that all the rest of my dormant plants are getting. I'm not worried too much about watering because it's already in the ground. The soil's going to do what the soil's going to do, and we're not going to have to worry about watering until it wakes up. I can take my little box of Jack in the Pulpit here, and I can put this, since it's already closed up and it's already still asleep. These little Jack in the Pulpits are still totally asleep. I'm going to put it in my basement. In my basement, it's an old Victorian home, so it's kind of more of a cellar, and it's going to be about 45 degrees down there for most of the late, March into April. It's going to be very cool down there. It's not going to be freezing, but it's going to be cool. So it's going to be cool. It's going to be, dark down there, and I'm just going to hold my perennials that are still sleeping, my liatris, my convallaria here, my trillium. All of these are great, easy shade garden perennials and sun garden in the case of the liatris. These guys are still asleep. I'm just going to throw them in my basement. I'm going to forget about them until about mid-April when my soil is workable, and then I can get them into the garden. But if you've got a plant like this and you're holding it in warmer temperatures like we have here in the store, right? These plants are going to start to break dormancy. You are going to have to watch with your watering and making sure that the bags stay moist. Now, another thing about BareRoot that it's super important to remember, when I go to plant this little guy, I am not just going to stick him in a pot right now. I am going to soak him for about 12 hours in a clean bucket of water to rehydrate this root. So this root has been sitting in, essentially this is just peat moss. So you can just see this is a plain peat moss mix, and that keeps the root healthy. It keeps it from getting any kind of yucky fungus or any issues, but it also kind of dries that root system out. So with any BareRoot plant, it's a really good idea to soak that root system for about 12 to 24 hours prior to planting out in the garden, which will rehydrate the plant and get it ready to grow.
Would you recommend using microhyzey when planting?
Yeah, so microhyzey and root stimulator. I've got some root stimulator right here. I didn't grab the bag of microhyzey, but you guys all know I'm a big fan of both root stimulator and microhyzey for new plantings of any plant. And microhyzey is a great way to get your plants started off with a bang, because what will happen is if I'm going to take this little guy home, I'm going to soak him for 12 hours. I'm going to put him in a pot because he's already broken dormancy. I'm going to dust him with some microhyzey, which will bond to his little root system, and that will make the roots much easier for them because the microhyzey will help them to take up more nutrition. It will help them to take up more water. They'll grow much more successfully. But it's important to remember that microhyzey doesn't bond with everything. So my little blueberry friend here, Northland, you actually have to buy a specifically formulated blueberry microhyzey for blueberries and things like azaleas because they use a totally different species. It's very hard to find, and it's generally not commercially available in most pre-mixed microhyzey bags. So blueberries do not bond to our either of our Gertens formulations, the shrub and tree or the flower and vegetable. So you're going to have to, if you want to use a microhyzey on that, you're going to actually have to try to find a blueberry microhyzey. But what you should be using is root stimulator. So once this guy is all buttoned up and he's in his pot and he's all happy to go, I will apply, so after watering him, I will apply a root stimulator every 2 weeks just to get him going and to get his little roots growing. The more root you have, the happier the plant you have, and the faster that plant is going to take off when you get him out into the garden in the springtime.
Erin has another question. Do you need different varieties of fruiting shrubs to get better fruit production?
Oh, that's a really good question, Erin. Thank you for asking that. So it really depends on the fruits that we are planting. So for something like a Northland blueberry, you will not get blueberries with one blueberry plant. You never will. Blueberries are not what we call self-fruitful. So you have to have two different varieties of blueberry in order to get blueberries off of one blueberry plant. So you always have to buy blueberries in pairs. You want two blueberries that are going to bloom at the same time in order to produce blueberries for you. Again, I wouldn't expect this baby plant to actually fruit this year, but I need to get him a friend or he will not make blueberries for me. So I can't just plant two Northlands, even though Northland is a great plant and I love it. I will have to plant a Northland and an early blue, or a Northland and a Patriot or a Cherokee or any of the other wonderful blueberries that we carry in the spring, and pair both of those in my yard to get fruit. With a heritage raspberry, however, raspberries are self-fruitful. So you only need one raspberry, which will very quickly, by the way, these are brambles. You will get more than one raspberry very quickly out of buying one raspberry plant. Those will make raspberries for you with only one varietal.
What are the easiest small fruits to plant?
BareRoot, definitely raspberries. I've done all my raspberries BareRoot and they are fantastic. They just take off. Raspberries in general are very easy to grow, so they're really easy to get started via BareRoot because you pretty much just throw them in the ground, put some compost on them and walk away. Make sure that they get watered. That's really the only care they need, and they just are happy little friends, and they will fill up your whole raspberry patch with raspberry brambles and you'll get tons of raspberries to eat. Hops is another one. It's a really great, so this is the same kind of plant that you can make beer from. We sell hops vines. Now this is a very young plant. You can't even see the little stem in there. It's in there. This is a very young plant of nugget hops, which is a great for microbrewing. If you are into microbrewing, you can use this hops. It's also a really good fence cover or pergola cover. It's almost too big for an arbor actually, because it can get 15 to 20 feet long. But nugget is a great hops varietal. It's very, very easy to grow. This one I wouldn't have any concern starting from BareRoot because they grow so fast and so quickly. They're gonna go. Those are very easy. Strawberries are another classic. A lot of times if you order a strawberry, I don't know if we've got one sitting up on the, okay. If you order strawberries, a lot of times strawberries just come BareRoot. So you can of course buy them potted from us later in the springtime, but a lot of folks will start their strawberry patches with BareRoot strawberries. Very, very simple.
Someone is also eyeing that hearty kiwi.
Yes, hearty kiwis. So this is a new varietal. We've never had this one before. This is prolific. There are only, as far as I know, this is an Actinidia arguta, which is just basically the scientific name of hardy kiwi. So if you look at the picture of the hardy kiwi, they don't have fuzzies and they're not brown. So they aren't the kind of kiwi that you get at the grocery store. These guys are about the size of a grape. They are hairless, but they're much tougher than the brown fuzzy kiwis are, and you can grow them here in Minnesota. Most kiwi require both a male kiwi and a lady kiwi to get the kiwi pollen onto the kiwi pistil, and then all of a sudden you have kiwi fruit, okay? But with prolific, this is a self-fruitful kiwi. You do not have to buy a male kiwi in order to get kiwis off of this little vine here. So you can just grab one kiwi, and for some of us, one kiwi is all we have room for, because these guys, again, much like hops, these are like a 15 to 20 foot vine. How many, for folks who have big long fence lines, you can do 3 or 4 kiwi, no problem, but for some of us, maybe like one 15 to 20 foot vine is all you have room for. So in that case, you can just buy one prolific kiwi, and it will make you kiwis without having to have a boyfriend, if you will.
And one final question. You have a hardy fig sitting there as well.
Yes. So we have some selections here of different kinds of things. So I'll kind of take you through the table and all of my selections so you guys can kind of see what we have. Now we have way more than just this. I have tons and tons of things to choose from in our BareRoot selection. We have some hardy shade and sun perennials like our Echinacea magnus. We have our Liatris. Here I have some Jack in the Pulpit and Trillium, as well as the spring classic Convallaria. People love Lily of the Valley, and it's super easy to grow from BareRoot. Then we have so these are absolutely hardy in Minnesota. Rock hard, absolutely will come back every year. If you don't kill it in the springtime, pretty much all you got to do is get it to summer. These guys are going to go, right? These are really tough. They're just going to come back every year. It's really important to remember both Jack in the Pulpit and Trillium are what we call an ephemeral, which means they'll come up in the spring, they'll do their thing, and then they'll die down. So by about July, you won't see your Trillium or your Jack in the Pulpit anymore. They'll be back down in the ground. Then we have what I call tender hardy. And these are plants that are zone 5. And they may make it in the garden and they may not make it in the garden. It really depends on your siting, how deep your mulch layer is over the winter, and how well you do at protecting the upper part of the plant over the winter. And our fig, our Chicago Hardy fig, is one of those. So let's talk a little bit about the Chicago Hardy fig. I love figs. Secret squirrel thing, Karen loves fig. I love fig Newtons, I love fig cookies, I love fig everything, fig spread, just give me all the fig stuff. So most figs, we have some gorgeous brown turkey figs here. Those are grown as houseplants because generally figs are only hardy to about zone 6, which for in the United States is about like Missouri, about down there. Kentucky is zone 6. Oregon is zone 6 as well. So those are fairly mild winters. And they are not going to, if you put a brown turkey in the ground, you are going to kill that brown turkey. It will not make it through our winter, okay? It'll be a dead plant. With Chicago Hardy, the reason it's called Chicago is because this varietal was found in Chicago, which is only about a 45-minute plane ride from us, and they are right on that border of zone 5, zone 4. So the Chicago Hardy fig, what it will do, if it's happy in its spot and it has a really well-protected root base, is it could possibly die down to the ground each year, but if it's got a happy, healthy root system, it will come back from the ground, grow big, make figs. You get figs, then the plant dies the winter, and it does it over and over again. So you may not have a big, happy, gorgeous fig bush like the folks who are growing figs down in Missouri and Kentucky will, but what you will have is you'll actually have figs off of a fig plant. So Chicago Hardy is tough enough that if you mulch it well and you site it properly on the southeast side of your home, okay, it has to be in a warm spot. It cannot be out on the northwest where it's getting the worst of the winter wind and the negative 25-degree air. It has to be close to the home. It has to be in a deep mulch layer, and I strongly recommend putting burlap over the upper branches to try to protect as much of that wood as you can each winter. So you put that on in November, you take it off on Easter. That's when the burlap goes on and off, Thanksgiving to Easter. That will give you enough protection that you can probably keep a Chicago Hardy fig in your backyard. Now, is that more work than a raspberry? Yes, it is. But if you, like me, love figs, maybe it's worth that extra work to keep it in your garden. All right, that is all the time we have to talk about bare roots this morning. You can see the sun is rising and we're ready to start our day here at Gerton's. We welcome you to come and visit us. Come and talk to me about BareRoot. We have a fantastic selection of edibles, of fruits, of annuals and semi-annual and semi-hardy plants here to pick from. So many things. We even have the very beginning of our potato selection in. So for those of you, little Lord of the Rings drop here, what is Taters Precious? The taters are in. Come and get them. I look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye, everybody.